Picture this. You are standing in the absolute center of a temple, carved from living rock thousands of years ago. The air is cool and still. You lean close to a companion and you whisper. It is the softest sound, barely audible to your own ears. Yet, that same whisper travels, clear and unmistakable, across the vast chamber to someone standing 100 feet away. It feels like magic. It feels like a secret passed directly through the stone itself. But what you are experiencing is not magic at all. It is the result of a highly sophisticated and largely forgotten science, a deliberate architectural genius that transformed empty space into a powerful instrument. This is the world of sacred acoustics, a hidden dimension of our ancient past where sound was not an afterthought, but a foundational tool used to shape human experience in the most profound ways. For centuries, we have marveled at the visual grandeur of ancient monuments, the towering pyramids, the sprawling temples, the intricate carvings. We have studied their geometry and astronomy, trying to decode the minds of their builders. But we have largely been silent about what these places sounded like. We have been exploring these sacred spaces with our eyes wide open, but our ears effectively covered. What if the true purpose of these structures can only be understood when we learn to listen to them? Today, we are going to explore the incredible sound maps of antiquity. We will journey from the subterranean labyrinths of Malta to the mountaintop citadels of Peru and into the heart of the Greek theater to discover how entire civilizations engineered their world to harness acoustic power. We will uncover the secrets behind these designs, revealing a technological prowess that rivals our modern understanding, and we will ask a simple but revolutionary question: why did it matter so much? The answer lies in a deeper connection to the universe, one that our ancestors understood intuitively. For them, sound was not merely vibration. It was a living force, a conduit to the divine, a way to alter consciousness and bind communities together. By building spaces that could amplify a chant, distort a trumpet blast into an unearthly roar, or create a silence so deep it felt like eternity, these ancient architects were crafting experiences. They were designing emotional and spiritual journeys using the very physics of sound as their blueprint. This video is an invitation to listen to history in a whole new way. It is a chance to step beyond the silent stones we see in museums and to hear the echoes of ceremonies long past, to understand that these places were once alive with resonant power. So prepare to have your perception of the ancient world permanently altered as we begin our journey into the resonant past. To truly grasp the scale of this achievement, picture a world without metal tools, without advanced mathematics as we know it, and without written language to record complex plans. The builders of the Hypogeum worked solely with stone, bone, and obsidian tools, carving this multi-level sanctuary directly out of the limestone bedrock. They descended deeper and deeper, creating halls, chambers, and passages that mirror the above-ground temples found across Malta. But within this incredible feat of engineering lies an even more subtle and mysterious layer of design. The so-called oracle room is not a large chamber. It is a relatively small, oval-shaped space. Its acoustic secret lies in its specific dimensions and the way its walls were carved. They were not left rough, they were carefully smoothed and shaped into a parabolic curve, a form we now know is excellent for collecting sound waves at one focal point and projecting them outward. When a person speaks in a deep, resonant voice from a specific niche in this room, the sound doesn't just echo, it undergoes a remarkable transformation. The voice gains a powerful, buzzing resonance, a vibration that seems to emanate from the stone itself, traveling through the underground network of chambers with an unsettling clarity. This was far more than a clever trick. For a culture deeply engaged in rituals concerning life, death, and communication with the spirit world, this acoustic effect would have been profoundly spiritual. Imagine a shaman or priest standing in that niche, his chant transformed into a booming, omnipresent force that filled the entire subterranean complex. For the initiates gathered in the adjacent chambers, the sound would not have seemed like it was coming from a man. It would have felt like the voice of an ancestor, a deity, or the earth spirit speaking directly to them. The architecture itself became a medium for the divine, an instrument that blurred the line between the human and the supernatural. This intentional manipulation of sound was a tool for altering states of consciousness, for inspiring awe and fear, and for cementing the authority of the ritual leaders. It was, in essence, a form of spiritual technology. What makes the Hypogeum so pivotal in our story is its age. Dating back to around 3600 BCE, it stands as one of the oldest known examples of purpose-built acoustic architecture in the world. This tells us that the desire to harness sound for ceremonial purposes is not a later development in human history. It is foundational. The megalithic temple building culture of Malta was experimenting with and perfecting these principles millennia before the Parthenon was even a concept. Their work demonstrates a sophisticated, albeit intuitive, understanding of sound wave behavior. They learned through observation and experimentation how the shape of a room, the texture of a wall, and the properties of the local limestone could work in concert to create a specific auditory experience. The Whispering Stones of Malta are not a solitary anomaly. They are a starting point. They represent humanity's first documented steps on a path that would lead to ever more complex and ambitious sonic landscapes, setting a precedent that would echo through the ages. So, if the Hypogeum shows us the what, the next logical question is the how. How did ancient builders, often working with seemingly primitive tools, achieve such precise acoustic effects? The answer lies in a foundational principle that we can call intentional resonance. This is the core concept that separates a happy acoustic accident from a deliberate sonic technology. Intentional resonance means designing a space from the ground up to enhance specific sound frequencies, to make them louder, clearer, and longer lasting. Think of it like tuning a musical instrument, but instead of tuning strings, you are tuning an entire room. The goal was to create a sympathetic vibration, a phenomenon where the architecture itself begins to vibrate in harmony with the human voice or a specific instrument, amplifying its power and emotional impact. This tuning process involved three master strokes of ancient engineering. First, and perhaps most mysteriously, was the use of precise mathematical ratios. We know that many ancient cultures held certain numbers and geometric relationships as sacred. What we are now discovering is that these ratios, like the golden ratio or simple harmonic fractions, also produce distinct acoustic properties. A room built with dimensions based on a 2-to-1 ratio, for example, will naturally reinforce a specific fundamental tone and its harmonics. The builders may not have described it in terms of hertz and wavelengths, but they understood through practice that building to these proportions resulted in a space that sang beautifully. The second critical element was the conscious selection of building materials. This was a form of ancient material science. Not all stone sounds the same. Limestone, which is relatively porous, absorbs some high-frequency sounds, creating a warmer, softer reverberation. Granite, on the other hand, is incredibly dense and reflective. It produces bright, sharp echoes that can ring out for a surprisingly long time. The builders chose their stone not just for its structural strength or visual appeal, but for its sonic signature. In some cases, like with the Minoans of Crete, we find evidence of them using specific types of gypsum plaster on walls, a material known to dampen certain frequencies and create a more controlled acoustic environment. They were, in effect, acoustic alchemists. Finally, we have the strategic shaping of surfaces. This is where the artistry of the stonemason met the physics of sound. A flat, parallel wall will create a predictable echo, but a curved wall, especially one carved into a parabolic or elliptical shape, can perform magic. It can focus sound waves like a lens focuses light, projecting a whisper from one point to a specific listening point dozens of feet away. A concave ceiling can create a diffuse, enveloping sound field, making a chant feel like it's coming from all directions at once. By angling walls, carving niches, and sculpting ceilings, the ancient architects directed the flow of sound with the same intention a modern sound engineer uses a mixing board. The important thing to understand is that this was not merely decorative or an accidental byproduct of aiming for visual grandeur. It was a deliberate, functional technological application. The resonance was the point. In a spiritual ceremony, this technology had a profound purpose. A chant amplified by the very stones of a temple would feel more powerful, more authoritative, more divine. The vibration moving through your body would be intensified, creating a visceral, physiological response that could elevate a ritual from a simple observance to a transformative experience. The building itself became an active participant in the ceremony, a partner to the priest, and a gateway to the sacred. Mastering this principle of intentional resonance is the master key that unlocks the true purpose of countless ancient sites, moving us from seeing them as silent ruins to understanding them as dynamic instruments of human consciousness. From the intimate carved chambers of Malta, we now turn our attention to a structure that needs no introduction, a monument that has captivated humanity for millennia. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as the ultimate symbol of ancient Egyptian ingenuity, a masterpiece of geometric precision and staggering scale. For centuries, we have been obsessed with its alignment to the stars, the mathematical constants potentially encoded in its dimensions, and the mystery of its construction. But what if, in focusing so intently on what we can see and measure, we have been missing a crucial dimension of its design? What if the Great Pyramid was also engineered to be heard? The conventional understanding of the pyramid's interior is starkly functional. A series of ascending passageways leading to a few key chambers, most notably the King's Chamber, which houses a solitary, coffer-like sarcophagus made from a single block of red granite. The air is still, the space austere. It is difficult to imagine this place filled with anything but silence. However, a growing body of acoustic research suggests that this silence is an illusion, a condition of the modern, empty state. When filled with sound, these chambers may reveal a hidden purpose. The King's Chamber, in particular, is an acoustic anomaly. Its walls, floor, and ceiling are constructed entirely from massive granite blocks, a stone known for its exceptional hardness and sound-reflective properties. The chamber itself is a perfect rectangular box, but its most intriguing feature is its ceiling, which is not flat. It is composed of 5 layers of immense granite beams, creating a series of low, confined spaces above the main room, known as the relieving chambers. This unique construction does more than just distribute weight. It creates a complex resonant cavity. Researchers conducting experiments within the chamber have discovered something extraordinary. When certain low-frequency sounds are produced, deep chants, drumming, or even the sustained note of a horn, the space does not simply create an echo. Instead, it generates a strange, sustained reverberation, a standing wave that seems to hang in the air, filling the chamber with a palpable, vibrating energy. The frequency around 110 Hertz has been noted to produce a particularly powerful effect. This is not a random phenomenon. The dimensions of the chamber, the specific properties of the granite, and the configuration of the ceiling spaces all combine to amplify and sustain these specific low frequencies. The sarcophagus itself, empty and made of the same resonant stone, may have acted as a secondary resonator, adding another layer of complexity to the sound. The question, of course, is why? Why would the pyramid's architects go to such incredible lengths, quarrying and transporting hundreds of tons of specific granite from hundreds of miles away to create this precise sonic environment? The answer likely lies in the Egyptians' sophisticated spiritual worldview. Sound, particularly rhythmic drumming and deep, resonant chanting, is a well-documented tool for altering brainwave patterns, potentially inducing states of deep meditation, trance, or heightened awareness. If the pyramid was, as many believe, not just a tomb but a vehicle for the pharaoh's spiritual transformation and journey to the afterlife, then the king's chamber could have been the ultimate initiation room. Imagine a ritual taking place in that confined, dark space. A priest or a group of initiates would produce these low-frequency sounds. The chamber would then magnify them, transforming human effort into an overwhelming, omnipresent force. The vibration would be felt in the bones as much as heard by the ears, creating a visceral, disorienting, and profoundly powerful experience. This could have been interpreted as the voice of the gods themselves, speaking directly to the soul of the initiate, facilitating a passage between worlds. It is crucial to acknowledge the debate surrounding these ideas. Mainstream Egyptology often views such acoustic theories with skepticism, arguing that there is no direct textual evidence from the Egyptians themselves describing an intentional sonic function. The effects they suggest could be a fascinating but coincidental byproduct of the structural and symbolic choices made by the builders. This skepticism is healthy and necessary. It pushes researchers to seek more concrete evidence. However, the absence of written proof does not equate to proof of absence. The Egyptians were masters of experiential knowledge, of secrets passed down through priestly lineages, knowledge that may never have been committed to papyrus. The sheer precision of the construction, combined with the undeniable and unique acoustic properties of the chamber, makes a strong case for intentionality. The pyramid begins to emerge not as a silent, static tomb, but as a dynamic, multi-sensory instrument. It was a machine designed not only to endure for eternity, but to resonate with it, using the physics of sound to achieve a spiritual objective that we are only just beginning to comprehend. This challenges us to expand our perception of ancient technology, to listen to the past, and to understand that their genius extended into realms we are still exploring today. But to truly grasp the motivation behind this sophisticated acoustic engineering, we must move beyond the physics and into the philosophy. The ancient world did not separate science from spirituality. They were two sides of the same coin. This brings us to our second and perhaps most profound guiding principle: sound as a spiritual conduit. For these cultures, sound was not merely a physical vibration moving through the air. It was a living, creative force, a direct channel to the divine, the very fabric of existence itself. This worldview is perfectly captured in the ancient Hindu concept of Nada Brahma, a Sanskrit phrase that translates to "the world is sound" or "sound is God." This is not a metaphor. It is a fundamental cosmological belief that the entire universe, from the swirling galaxies to the smallest atom, is in a state of vibration emanating from a primordial sound. In this context, human speech, chanting, and music were not just artistic expressions. they were participations in the ongoing creation of reality, a way to harmonize individual consciousness with the cosmic order. This belief system provides the essential why behind the intricate how of acoustic design. If sound is the bridge between worlds, then the clarity, power, and purity of that sound become matters of utmost spiritual importance. A priest's chant in a perfectly resonant temple was not just a prayer being spoken, it was a prayer being amplified and perfected by the architecture, ensuring it reached the ears of the gods with maximum potency. The temple itself was transformed from a passive container for ritual into an active instrument of devotion. Think of it as a spiritual amplifier. The carefully shaped stones and calculated proportions work to take the flawed, human-produced sound and refine it, stripping away its earthly imperfections and transforming it into something perceived as supernatural and divine. This explains why the acoustic properties of a sacred space were often given the same level of attention as its visual grandeur. The perfect echo was as important as the perfect pillar. The clarity of a whispered oracle was as crucial as the beauty of a carved relief. They were building a communication device. We can see this principle manifested across the globe. In the Vedic traditions of India, the precise pronunciation of Sanskrit mantras was considered vital for their effectiveness. The temples, with their tall, hollow towers and resonant inner chambers, were designed to enhance the complex harmonics of these chants, creating a sonic atmosphere thick with spiritual energy. Similarly, in Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, the deep, multi-tonal chanting of monks is amplified by the specific dimensions of the prayer hall, the sound waves reflecting off polished floors and painted walls to create an immersive, mind-altering drone that facilitates deep meditation. Even in the Aboriginal cultures of Australia, the rhythmic clapping of boomerangs or the deep drone of the didgeridoo during ceremonies in natural rock amphitheaters was believed to open a pathway to the dreamtime, the sacred era of creation. The common thread is the architecture, whether built or natural, serving as a collaborator in a cosmic dialogue. It was the technological means to achieve a spiritual end, turning vibration into vision and sound into revelation. Now, let us travel from the geometric precision of the Egyptian desert to the mist-shrouded peaks of the Peruvian Andes. Here, at an altitude of over 10,000 feet, the Chavín culture established a spiritual center that would flourish for centuries, beginning around 900 BC. The temple complex of Chavín de Huántar is not merely a collection of stone buildings. It is a sprawling, multi-level labyrinth, a masterpiece of pre-Incan engineering that functioned with the complexity of a living organism. And at the very heart of its design was a sophisticated understanding of sound, used not just for amplification, but for psychological manipulation on a grand scale. The most striking feature of Chavín is its extensive network of underground galleries. These are not simply storage rooms or foundations. They are narrow, precisely engineered passageways, some with staircases and ventilation shafts, carved deep beneath the main plazas and temples. But within this subterranean world lies the true secret, a system of stone ducts, often referred to as acoustic conduits. These ducts run through the walls and under the floors, connecting different parts of the complex in a way that seems deliberately designed to carry sound. The key to unlocking this system was a specific instrument, the Pututu. This was not a simple noisemaker. A Pututu is a trumpet crafted from a large conch shell, often meticulously carved with intricate designs. When blown by a skilled musician, it produces a deep, mournful, and penetrating blast, a sound unlike any other in the natural world of the high Andes. Archaeoacoustic research at Chavín has revealed something astonishing. If a person stands at a specific point, such as the entrance to one of the sunken circular plazas, and blows a pututu, the sound does not travel in a straight line through the open air. Instead, it is captured by the architecture. The sound waves enter these stone ducts and are funneled through the underground galleries, emerging at various points throughout the entire temple complex. But the journey through the stone does not leave the sound unchanged. The twisting, turning paths and the resonant properties of the granite distort the pure note of the shell. By the time it reaches the ears of someone standing in a distant courtyard or an inner chamber, the Pututu's call is transformed. It gains an eerie, metallic ring, a dissonant echo that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It sounds less like a shell being blown by a human and more like a cry from the underworld. We must consider the experience from the perspective of an initiate arriving at Chavín de Huántar, perhaps after a long and arduous pilgrimage. The site itself was a major religious destination, drawing people from across the region. The ceremonies held here were intense, often involving psychoactive plants like the San Pedro cactus, which would alter the participants' perception. Imagine such an individual already in a suggestible state entering the complex. They would hear the deep, booming call of the Pututu, but it would be unnervingly disembodied. The sound would swirl around the stone courtyards, seeming to emanate from the walls themselves, or even from deep within the earth. For a culture that believed the world was inhabited by powerful spirits and deities, this acoustic effect would have been profoundly convincing. It was not a priest speaking, it was the temple itself that was speaking. The architecture was claiming a voice, creating the illusion that the initiate was in direct communication with the ancestral spirits or the gods of the mountain. This was acoustic technology deployed as a form of sacred theater, designed to disorient, awe, and ultimately convince. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. The disorientation caused by the distorted, omnipresent sound would break down an initiate's ordinary sense of reality, making them more receptive to the spiritual teachings and visions that were central to the Chavín ritual experience. The priests who understood the secret pathways of the sound could manage these auditory events with precision, enhancing their own authority as intermediaries with the supernatural. The entire complex becomes an instrument of control and transformation, where sound is the primary tool for guiding the emotional and spiritual journey of every visitor. Chavín de Huántar stands as one of the most compelling and clear-cut examples of ancient psychoacoustics. It moves beyond simple resonance into the realm of deliberate auditory illusion, proving that these early engineers were not just interested in making sounds louder, but in using sound to sculpt human consciousness itself. While the temples of Malta and Peru used sound to connect humanity with the divine, the ancient Greeks achieved something equally revolutionary. They harnessed acoustics to perfect democracy itself. This shift from the sacred to the civic is nowhere more brilliantly illustrated than at the theater of Epidaurus. Constructed in the 4th century BCE, this magnificent structure seated up to 14,000 people, yet its design ensured that even the softest spoken word from the stage could reach the spectator in the very last row. The famous claim that you can hear the rustle of a paper or the drop of a coin from any seat is not an exaggeration. It is a testament to an acoustic engineering miracle that has puzzled and inspired architects for over 2 millennia. Unlike the hidden, subterranean chambers of the Hypogeum, Epidaurus was built in the open air, a semi-circular bowl carved into a hillside designed for public spectacle, for the shared experience of theater, oration, and music. The secret to its perfection lies in a masterful application of physics, achieved without any electronic assistance. The key was the understanding and manipulation of sound wave reflection. The performing area, known as the orchestra, was a circular floor of packed earth, often backed by a stone building called the skene. But the true genius is in the auditorium itself, the koilan. The seating was not just stepped, it was precisely graduated. The rows of limestone seats act as a series of filters and amplifiers, lower frequency sounds which carry the fundamental power of the human voice, travel in a more omnidirectional pattern. The stepped arrangement of the seats naturally reflects these waves upward, preventing them from being lost into the open sky above the stage. Meanwhile, the higher frequency sounds, which provide the clarity and intelligibility of consonants, are also captured. The corrugated surface created by the rows of seats acts as a natural diffraction grating, scattering the high frequencies and ensuring they spread evenly throughout the audience instead of bouncing straight back. This was a conscious design choice, not a happy accident. The limestone used for the seats has just the right amount of porosity. It is reflective enough to project sound, but not so smooth that it creates a harsh, slapping echo. Furthermore, the steepness of the seating bowl is critical. It places the audience members' heads directly in the path of the sound waves coming from the stage, with minimal obstruction. There are no parallel surfaces between the stage and the seats to create problematic flutter echoes, and the natural hillside behind the theater absorbs extraneous background noise, creating a remarkably quiet listening environment. Every element, from the angle of each seat to the material it was made from, was calculated to work in harmonic concert. The result is an acoustic environment where the actor's voice is not merely amplified. It is clarified and enriched, as if the very stone is collaborating with the performer to ensure the story is heard. The significance of Epidaurus extends far beyond technical achievement. It represents a profound cultural evolution in the purpose of acoustic design. Here, sound engineering was not reserved for priests and secret initiations. It was a tool for civic engagement and mass education. In the Athenian tradition, theater was not mere entertainment. It was a vital part of public life, a medium for exploring complex moral, political, and philosophical ideas through the tragedies of Aeschylus and Sophocles. For a democracy to function, its citizens needed to be informed and engaged. The amphitheater ensured that a political speech, a philosophical argument, or a dramatic parable could be delivered with perfect clarity to thousands of citizens simultaneously. It enabled a shared intellectual and emotional experience on a scale previously unimaginable. This was the democratization of acoustic power. In the echoing chambers of Chavín, sound was used by a privileged few to manipulate and awe the many. At Epidaurus, that same power was placed at the service of the community. The architecture fostered a sense of collective participation. When 14,000 people laugh, gasp, or weep at the same moment, prompted by the same perfectly heard line, social bonds are strengthened. The amphitheater became the beating heart of the polis, the city-state, a place where society could literally hear itself think. The Greeks, therefore, perfected more than just public address through stone. They perfected a technology for building a cohesive and enlightened civic body. The pristine acoustics of Epidaurus stand as a timeless monument to the idea that clear communication is the very foundation of a functioning society, an ideal that resonates as powerfully today as it did over 2,000 years ago. So far, we have explored how ancient cultures shaped stone to control sound, carving chambers and building theaters with astonishing precision. But this mastery of acoustics did not stop at the walls they built. It began with the land they chose. The third principle guiding these ancient sound architects was a profound practice we can call acoustic geomancy, the art of selecting and aligning a sacred site based on the inherent sonic properties of the natural landscape itself. These builders understood that the earth was not a silent canvas but a resonant body, and the most powerful structures were those that harmonized with the pre-existing music of the environment. This approach transformed site selection into a sacred science. Instead of simply finding a flat, stable piece of ground, these ancient geomancers would listen to the land. They sought out locations where nature had already engineered perfect acoustics. A deep, reverberant cave became more than just a shelter. It was a ready-made ceremonial chamber, its echoes hinting at a connection to the underworld. A narrow, steep-sided valley acted as a natural amplifier, where a shout from one end could be carried for miles, making it an ideal place for gathering a community or signaling across distances. A bowl-shaped depression on a mountainside was a gift from the gods, a natural amphitheater requiring only the addition of seating to become a public venue. By building upon these natural soundscapes, the architects gave their constructions an acoustic head start, weaving their artificial enhancements seamlessly into the sonic fabric of the earth. A compelling, though still debated, example of this may be the world's most famous stone circle, Stonehenge. For generations, the primary focus has been on its astronomical alignments, how the stones frame the sunrise on the summer solstice. But a team of researchers from the University of Huddersfield proposed a fascinating acoustic theory. They noted that the monument sits within a broad, natural basin, surrounded by gentle hills. This topography, they suggest, creates a unique sonic environment. In the time before the modern world filled the air with noise, this basin may have acted as a vast sound trap. Sounds generated within the circle, like drumming or chanting, would have been contained and reflected by the surrounding landscape, preventing them from dissipating quickly and creating a more intense, immersive experience for the participants. The very placement of the stones, therefore, might have been chosen not just for what you could see from there, but for what you could hear. This principle of acoustic geomancy can be seen across the globe. In the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblones often built their cliff dwellings under massive, concave rock overhangs. These natural sandstone ceilings not only provided shelter, but also acted as excellent sound reflectors, projecting conversations and daily activities across the community while also protecting the sound from wind. In Greece, the oracle at Delphi was situated on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, a location riddled with geological faults and emitting gases. The specific sonic and vibrational qualities of this geologically active zone were likely part of its sacred character. In Peru, the Incas built Machu Picchu on a saddle between two peaks, with the roaring Urubamba River below providing a constant, thunderous white noise that may have masked other sounds, creating a private, meditative atmosphere for the elite. This deep integration of architecture and landscape acoustics reveals a holistic worldview that stands in stark contrast to our modern approach. Today, we often see a building as an object placed upon the land. We then use insulation and soundproofing to block out the natural environment, creating a controlled, artificial sonic bubble inside. The ancient builder, however, saw their structure as an extension of the land. The goal was not to dominate nature, but to collaborate with it. They listened to the whispers of the wind, the echoes of the canyon, and the rumble of the earth, and they designed their sacred spaces to be in dialogue with those sounds. This practice of acoustic geomancy reminds us that the most profound technologies are sometimes not about imposing our will on the world, but about learning to listen to its inherent intelligence and building in harmony with it. Leaping forward more than 1,000 years from the theaters of ancient Greece, we arrive at another pinnacle of architectural ambition, the Gothic cathedral. These colossal structures, with their impossibly tall naves and intricate stained glass, are rightly celebrated as marvels of engineering and art. But to walk into a cathedral like Chartres or Notre Dame and focus only on the visual spectacle is to miss half of the experience. These were not designed as silent monuments. They were engineered as immense musical instruments, crafted to resonate with the very voice of heaven. The tradition of sacred acoustics, born in the subterranean chambers of Malta and refined across millennia, found its ultimate expression in the stone and glass of medieval Europe. The defining acoustic feature of a Gothic cathedral is its reverberation time, the length of time a sound persists after the source has stopped. In a typical modern room, reverberation might last for a second or less. Inside a vast cathedral, a single clap or a sung note can hang in the air for 6, 8, even 10 seconds or more. This was not an accidental byproduct of building big, it was the entire point. Primary music of the medieval church was Gregorian chant, a form of monophonic, unaccompanied sacred singing characterized by long, flowing melodic lines. In an acoustically dry space with short reverberation, this chant can sound thin and exposed, but inside the cathedral, something magical happens. The sustained tones of the chant blend together, overlapping and merging within the vast stone vault. The sound does not come from the choir alone. It seems to emanate from the architecture itself, swelling to fill every corner of the sacred space with a thick, enveloping cloud of sound. This sonic atmosphere creates a profound psychological effect. The individual listener is immersed, bathed in sound. The distinct beginning and end of each phrase soften, creating a continuous, eternal present that dissolves the sense of clock time and evokes the timelessness of the divine. It is an experience of awe and transcendence, engineered note by note, stone by stone. This acoustic miracle was achieved through a series of brilliant architectural innovations. The Gothic style is defined by its use of the pointed arch, the ribbed vault, and the flying buttress. While these are often explained as solutions to the structural problem of building higher walls and larger windows, they were also acoustic masterstrokes. The pointed arches and ribbed vaults soaring high above the nave create a complex, irregular surface area far greater than that of a flat ceiling. This intricate topography of stone acts as a perfect diffuser, scattering sound waves in countless directions and preventing them from forming harsh, focused echoes. Instead of a distinct repetition, you get a smooth, seamless wash of reverberation. The flying buttress, by supporting the weight of the walls from the outside, allowed for those walls to be filled with vast windows instead of more stone. This replacement of heavy, sound-absorbing masonry with reflective glass further enhanced the cathedral's resonant qualities, making the space brighter and more lively acoustically. Perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of this design was its alignment with the specific musical modes used in worship. The architects and musicians of the time worked in a shared spiritual and intellectual universe. The proportions of the cathedral, the ratios between the length, width, and height of the nave were often based on the same harmonic ratios that governed the musical scales of Gregorian chant. For instance, a space built with a 2:1 ratio might naturally emphasize the fundamental tone and its octave, reinforcing the harmonic structure of the music sung within it. The massive stone pillars strategically placed were not merely supports, they acted as bass resonators, giving depth and power to the lower frequencies of the male voices. The entire building was in effect tuned. It was a collaborative instrument where the architecture supported and amplified the music, and the music, in return, activated the full spiritual potential of the architecture. The Gothic cathedral, therefore, represents the enduring legacy of ancient acoustic principles, refined through centuries of technological and spiritual evolution. It stands as a bridge between the intuitive sound shaping of the megalithic builders and the calculated science of the modern world. The master masons who raised these structures may not have used the language of Hertz and wavelengths, but they possessed a deep, practical understanding of how sound behaves in space. They knew that to create a house for God, they had to build not just for the eyes, but for the ears. The result was an environment where the boundary between human song and heavenly chorus blurred, where every chant offered was received by the congregation not as a performance, but as a participatory event, a vibration shared between the human and the divine. In the resonant heart of the cathedral, the ancient belief that sound is a conduit to the sacred found its most magnificent and enduring home. This idea that a building's form could be an active partner in a ceremony leads us to a deeper layer of understanding, a principle that connects the very shape of a space to its sound and its soul. We have seen how materials and proportions were carefully chosen, but the ancient architects went further still. They worked with fundamental shapes archetypes that carried profound symbolic meaning, and we are now discovering that these same shapes possess inherent acoustic properties. This was not a coincidence. It was a fusion of cosmology and physics, where the geometry of a sacred space was a direct expression of its spiritual purpose, and its sonic behavior was a key part of that expression. Consider the circle, one of the most universal and ancient sacred symbols. It represents unity, eternity, and the cycles of nature. From the stone circles of Europe to the round kivas of the American Southwest, this shape appears again and again. But the circle is also a remarkable acoustic shape. In a perfectly circular room, sound waves do not focus to a single point like in a parabola. Instead, they travel around the perimeter, creating a diffuse, enveloping sound field. There is no single sweet spot for hearing. The sound is shared equally by everyone around the circumference. This acoustic effect perfectly mirrors the circle's symbolic meaning. It fosters a sense of community and equality among participants. In a circular council chamber or a round dance floor, every voice carries the same weight. The architecture itself, through its sonic properties, encourages a collective experience, dissolving hierarchy and promoting a feeling of shared connection. The shape is the message and the sound is its voice. In stark contrast, the square or rectangle introduces a sense of order, stability, and directionality. It is the shape of the defined space, the temple precinct, the cardinal directions. But acoustically, a rectangular room with parallel walls creates a very specific phenomenon known as a flutter echo. When you clap your hands in such a space, you might hear a rapid, buzzing repetition of the sound as it ping-pongs back and forth between the hard, flat, opposing surfaces. To our modern ears, this might sound like a problem to be solved with acoustic panels, but for an ancient culture, this could have been a feature, not a bug. This flutter echo creates a natural, rhythmic effect. Imagine a ritual involving rhythmic stamping or clapping in a rectangular plaza. The architecture would instantly multiply that rhythm, adding a layer of percussive complexity, reinforcing the beat and creating a driving, trance-inducing sonic atmosphere. The parallel walls don't just enclose the ritual, they participate in it, their reflections turning a simple rhythm into a cascading, immersive auditory experience. Then there is the pyramid, a shape that speaks of ascent, of reaching from the earth toward the heavens. Its symbolic power is obvious, pointing to the sun and the stars. The acoustic theory surrounding pyramids is more speculative but fascinating. While large-scale testing is difficult, some researchers suggest that the pyramidal form, with its sloping sides converging to a point, may act to focus energy, including sound energy, upward. The Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid, with its corbelled walls narrowing as they rise, could be seen as an internalized expression of this principle, a channel designed to direct vibrational energy. The symbolic act of ascending toward the apex, whether physically or spiritually, may have been accompanied by an acoustic reality where sound was not spread outward to a crowd, but projected upward, as if carrying prayers directly to the realm of the gods. The shape itself becomes a conduit, aligning symbolic aspiration with a physical direction of energy flow. The crucial insight here is that these choices were not arbitrary. An ancient architect didn't simply think, "A circle would look nice here." They thought, "We need a space that brings our people together as one." And they knew, through centuries of accumulated experiential knowledge, that a circular structure would create the sonic environment to achieve that feeling. They understood that a rectangular plaza would enhance the power of their rhythmic ceremonies. They believed that a pyramidal temple would help lift their invocations to the sky. The archetypal shapes were a language. They were a way of embedding meaning directly into the geometry of the space, ensuring that the function, the acoustic and emotional experience, was inseparable from the form. This principle reveals a world view where every aspect of creation is interconnected, where a spiritual concept could be given physical expression through a shape that then produced a specific sonic reality. It was a holistic art where belief, architecture, and sound were woven into a single, powerful tapestry. Of all the ancient sites where sound and spirituality converged, perhaps none is more legendary or enigmatic than the Oracle of Delphi. For over 1,000 years, this was the center of the known world for the ancient Greeks. Kings, generals, and common citizens alike would make the arduous pilgrimage up the slopes of Mount Parnassus to seek guidance from the Pythia, the priestess who served as the mouthpiece of the god Apollo. She would deliver her often cryptic prophecies from a small, secluded chamber deep within the temple, entering a trance-like state that was believed to be a divine possession. For centuries, this was explained purely as a matter of faith, but modern science is revealing that the oracle's power may have been rooted in a far more tangible and astonishing phenomenon, the voice of the earth itself. The traditional explanation for the Pythia's altered state involved a chasm in the rock beneath the temple, from which intoxicating vapors would rise. For a long time, this was dismissed as myth, until geological surveys in the late 20th century confirmed a startling fact. The Temple of Apollo is situated directly atop not one, but two intersecting geologic fault lines. These cracks in the Earth's crust are part of a much larger system of fractures, and crucially, they were found to be a source of ethylene gas. Ethylene is a hydrocarbon that, in certain concentrations, can act as a mild narcotic, potentially inducing a euphoric or trance-like state. This discovery validated the ancient accounts of intoxicating vapors, but it may only be half the story. The same geologic forces that released these gases also produced something else, something just as powerful but completely inaudible: infrasound. Infrasound refers to sound waves with a frequency so low that they fall below the range of human hearing. We cannot consciously hear these vibrations, but that does not mean we cannot sense them. Our bodies are exquisitely tuned to detect these low-frequency waves. They can resonate within our chest cavities, they can affect our inner ears, and they can trigger primal, physiological responses. Exposure to certain levels of infrasound has been scientifically linked to a range of sensations, from feelings of awe and profound sadness to intense anxiety, cold chills, and even visual or auditory hallucinations. It is the kind of sound produced by massive natural events, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and large ocean waves, and it is precisely the kind of sound that would have been generated by the constant, subtle grinding and movement of the fault lines deep beneath the Temple of Apollo. Now consider the architecture of the temple, particularly the Aditon, the sacred, enclosed chamber where the Pythia performed her rituals. While its exact design remains partially debated, it was likely a small, subterranean or semi-subterranean room built directly upon the living rock of the mountain. Such a chamber, constructed from stone and set into the ground, would act as a perfect resonator for the low-frequency vibrations emanating from the earth. Just as the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid amplifies specific frequencies, the Aditon could have been designed, whether intentionally or intuitively, to capture and amplify these seismic infrasounds. The chamber would have become a box of invisible, inaudible energy, vibrating at a frequency that directly influences human consciousness. Picture the scene on a day of prophecy. The Pythia would have undergone elaborate preparations, fasting, ritual bathing, and possibly drinking from a sacred spring. She would then descend into the confined, likely smoke-filled space of the Aditon, already a place of immense psychological pressure. There, she would be exposed to a double dose of physiological manipulation, the light narcotic effect of the ethylene gas, and the powerful, pervasive thrum of infrasound vibrating through the very stone seat upon which she sat. This combination would be incredibly potent. The infrasound would induce a deep sense of unease or awe, perhaps causing her to shiver and feel a presence far greater than herself. The gas would lower her inhibitions and alter her perception. In this heightened state, the questions whispered by the attending priests would have landed on a mind uniquely primed for visionary experience. Her cryptic utterances, which the priests would then interpret into the famous Delphic prophecies, were not necessarily a conscious fraud. They could have been the genuine, if chemically and vibrationally assisted, expressions of a brain operating under extraordinary conditions. This theory transforms our understanding of Delphi from a purely spiritual site into a profound example of bioacoustic geomancy. The priests of Apollo may not have understood the physics of seismic waves or the molecular structure of ethylene, but through centuries of observation, they learned that this specific location possessed a unique power to facilitate communication with the divine. They built their temple precisely where the Earth was most active, harnessing the planet's own energies as a tool for revelation. This introduces a breathtaking expansion of the concept of sacred acoustics. It was not just about amplifying man-made chants or drumming. At Delphi, the architecture was designed to amplify the very heartbeat of the Earth, turning the subterranean rumble of tectonic plates into a vehicle for prophecy. The oracle did not just listen to the gods, she listened to the mountain, and the mountain, in its own deep and resonant voice, spoke back. For centuries, the acoustic secrets of ancient sites remained locked in silence, accessible only through speculation and fragmented historical accounts. We could admire the stones, but we couldn't hear their music. Today, that has all changed. A technological revolution is sweeping through archaeology, giving us ears to hear the past. This new field, known as Archaeoacoustics, employs a suite of non-invasive tools that allow scientists to map the sonic properties of these fragile structures with millimeter precision, without ever touching a stone. One of the most fundamental tools is impulse response recording. The process is both simple and brilliant. A researcher enters an ancient space, like the heart of a pyramid or the nave of a cathedral, and produces a short, sharp sound. This can be a balloon pop, a starter pistol fired into a special container, or a speaker emitting a brief sine wave sweep that covers all audible frequencies. This sound impulse acts like a sonic flashlight. Highly sensitive microphones placed strategically throughout the space record not just the initial sound, but every single reflection as it bounces off the walls, ceiling, floor, and pillars. The resulting recording is a unique acoustic fingerprint for that specific location, a dataset that captures exactly how that space responds to sound. This impulse response can then be applied, through a process called convolution reverb, to any other sound. Imagine taking a recording of a Gregorian chant made in a modern studio. By applying the impulse response of Chartres Cathedral, we can hear that same chant as if the monks were singing it inside the vast, reverberant space of the cathedral itself. It's a form of acoustic time travel, allowing us to test how specific instruments, vocal techniques, or even languages would have interacted with the architecture. But to truly understand a site's full potential, we need to see the big picture. This is where laser scanning, or LiDAR, comes in. Using lasers, researchers can create a phenomenally detailed 3D point cloud model of an entire structure, capturing every crack, curve, and imperfection in the stonework. This digital twin is geometrically perfect. When this precise model is imported into specialized acoustic modeling software, the real magic begins. The software treats the digital surface as a physical boundary and uses mathematical algorithms to simulate the behavior of sound waves within it. Researchers can then run virtual experiments that would be impossible in the real world. They can test how the acoustics change if a now missing wooden roof were in place, or if the space were filled with a crowd of people absorbing sound, or even if the interior was covered in sound-absorbing tapestries versus reflective plaster. They can move a virtual sound source, a singer, a drummer, a trumpet player, to any point in the digital space and listen from any other point, creating a complete map of how sound travels. This process reveals acoustic hotspots and dead zones, showing exactly where a speaker should stand to be heard most clearly, or where a specific ritual might have been performed to achieve the maximum psychological impact. This marriage of cutting-edge technology and ancient history is doing more than just satisfying our curiosity. It is fundamentally changing our interpretations. For example, acoustic models of Stonehenge have suggested that the original complete circle of stones, before many fell, would have created a surprisingly reverberant environment, supporting the theory that it was used for rhythmic, sound-based ceremonies. In Maya ball courts, simulations show how the parallel walls create not just a clear echo, but a distinct repetition that could have been used to mimic animal calls or spirit voices, adding a layer of meaning to the game's symbolism. This technological archaeology is a powerful tool for testing hypotheses. When a theory claims that a certain chamber was an oracle room, we can now use acoustic modeling to see if a whisper from the priest's location would indeed be projected to the congregation, or if the sound would simply die against the walls. It provides a level of empirical evidence that moves the discussion beyond philosophical debate. Ultimately, this work is about bridging a profound gap. It connects the intuitive, experiential knowledge of the ancient builders with the quantitative, analytical power of modern science. They knew through practice and tradition that a space shaped in a certain way would produce a certain feeling. We can now measure that feeling in milliseconds of reverberation and decibels of amplification. This doesn't diminish their achievement, it magnifies it. By listening to these digital reconstructions, we are not just hearing echoes, we are engaging in a dialogue with the past, beginning to comprehend the sophisticated sensory world they engineered. We are learning that their monuments were not silent sculptures, but dynamic instruments, and that by recovering their lost soundscapes, we take a vital step toward understanding the minds and hearts of those who built them. This mastery of physical acoustics leads us to the most human dimension of this ancient science, the profound psychology of sound. Beyond the mathematics of resonance and the engineering of echoes lay a deeper, more intimate goal. The ultimate purpose of shaping sacred space was to shape the human mind itself. These ancient architects were not just builders, they were psychological cartographers, using sound as their primary tool to map and guide the inner journey of every person who entered their domain. The building itself became an active, intelligent participant in the ritual, a silent partner that spoke directly to the subconscious through the careful manipulation of the sonic atmosphere. Consider the emotional power of a long reverberation. When you step into a space like a Gothic cathedral or a vast underground chamber where a single note hangs in the air for 8 or 10 seconds, something remarkable happens to your perception of time and space. That sustained sound creates an auditory illusion of vastness, suggesting a realm that extends far beyond what the eyes can see. It evokes a feeling of eternity, of timelessness. In a spiritual context, this is transformative. The worries and urgencies of the outside world, governed by the ticking clock, simply dissolve. The individual is enveloped in a sonic blanket that feels infinite, making concepts like the divine or the afterlife feel tangibly present. This is not a vague metaphor, it is a direct neurological effect. The prolonged soundscape encourages a shift in brainwave patterns, slowing the mind and facilitating states of deep contemplation, awe, and a sense of connection to something greater than oneself. It was the architectural equivalent of a deep, meditative breath for the soul. In stark contrast, a sharp, clear echo serves a completely different psychological purpose. Think of the famous Whispering Gallery in St. Paul's Cathedral in London, or the Ball Court at Chichen Itza. When a whisper is reflected with perfect clarity from a specific point, it creates an intense sensation of presence and communication. It feels personal, directed, and intentional. In an ancient setting, this effect could be wielded to create the illusion of a direct message from a deity or an ancestor. A priest whispering from a hidden niche could have their words delivered with crystal clarity to a single initiate, making it seem as though the voice was emanating from the very air around them. This fosters a sense of intimacy and revelation within a grand space, making the participant feel uniquely chosen or addressed by the divine. It transforms a public ceremony into a private, profound moment, leveraging acoustics to build belief and authority. Then there is the power of dissonance and distortion. Not all sacred sounds were meant to be beautiful or comforting. For initiation rites, where the goal was to break down the initiate's ordinary sense of self and prepare them for a rebirth into a new understanding, inducing fear and disorientation was often a key step. The architects of Chavín de Huántar mastered this art. By channeling the blast of a conch shell trumpet through stone ducts, they created an eerie, metallic, and dissonant resonance that seemed to come from the walls themselves. This kind of sound triggers primal alarm responses in the brain. It is unsettling, unpredictable, and strange. In a darkened, unfamiliar environment, perhaps enhanced by rhythmic flickering light or psychoactive substances, this auditory confusion would be overwhelmingly powerful. It shatters the individual's sense of control, making them more suggestible and open to the transformative teachings that would follow. The controlled use of acoustic unease was a deliberate tool for psychological breakdown, a necessary prelude to a spiritual breakthrough. The true genius of these ancient designers lay in their ability to sequence these acoustic experiences, crafting an emotional journey through stone and sound. A ritual might begin in a confined, dissonant space that induced anxiety and separation from the group. The initiate would then be led through a narrow passage acoustically representing a birth canal, and emerge into a vast, resonant chamber filled with harmonious chanting and a long, enveloping reverberation. This transition would guide the participant from a state of fear and individuality to one of tranquility and collective unity. The architecture was not a static backdrop. It was a dynamic guide, using its sonic properties to orchestrate a narrative of death and rebirth, fear and ecstasy, isolation and communion. By understanding the psychological impact of different sonic environments, these master builders could ensure that every ritual achieved its intended effect, leaving a permanent impression on the heart and mind of every person who experienced it. Far to the north, on the misty green island of Ireland, stands a monument that predates Stonehenge and even the Great Pyramids of Giza. Newgrange is a massive circular passage tomb, a great grassy mound that rises from the Boyne Valley, constructed over 5,000 years ago. To the modern eye, it appears as an ancient and silent hill, but to step inside is to enter a carefully engineered acoustic world, one designed not for grandeur but for profound intimacy. The most defining feature of its architecture is the long, narrow passageway that leads from the sole entrance to the central chamber. This is not a grand hallway. It is a constricted, stone-lined tunnel, just wide and tall enough for a single person to walk through, stooped over. This passage is the key to Newgrange's sonic magic. It acts as a powerful acoustic filter, a natural sound processor carved from the earth itself. Imagine a ceremony taking place at the entrance of the tomb on a dark, cold morning near the winter solstice. Outside, a group of participants might be chanting, drumming, or engaging in loud, communal rituals. The sound would be vibrant and chaotic, filled with the energy of the living world. But for those few initiates privileged enough to be inside the central chamber, the auditory experience would be utterly transformed. The long, twisting passage does not simply carry the sound from outside, it fundamentally alters it. As the sound waves travel down the stone corridor, they bounce off the irregular surfaces of the orthostats, the great standing stones that line the path. High-frequency sounds, which carry the sharp attack of a drumbeat or the clarity of a spoken word, are absorbed and scattered by the rough stone and the earth surrounding it. By the time the sound reaches the heart of the tomb, it is stripped of its sharp edges. The chanting from outside becomes a low, muffled, droning hum. The drumming is reduced to a deep, rhythmic throb, a vibration felt more in the bones than heard by the ears. The effect is a dramatic auditory contrast. The central chamber, a small, cruciform space with a high, corbelled roof, becomes a haven of profound sonic separation. The cacophony of the outside world is reduced to a distant, womb-like pulse. This creates an atmosphere of incredible intimacy and isolation, perfect for the deeply personal spiritual experiences that were likely the tomb's purpose. The acoustic design ensures that those inside are not distracted by the events outside. Instead, they are enveloped by a subdued, resonant blanket of sound that focuses attention inward. This was not an accident. The builders of Newgrange demonstrated a sophisticated understanding that the journey into a sacred space should be a journey of the senses as well. The narrow passage acts as an auditory transition zone, a buffer that leaves the mundane world behind and prepares the initiate for the revelations within. This sonic architecture finds its ultimate meaning in Newgrange's most famous feature, the winter solstice alignment. For a few precious minutes around sunrise on the shortest days of the year, a slender beam of sunlight penetrates through a specially designed opening above the entrance, known as the roof box. This shaft of light travels down the passage and illuminates the central chamber, flooding the otherwise dark space with a golden glow. The acoustic design is perfectly synchronized with this solar event. As the sun's light slowly fills the chamber, the muffled sounds from outside would have been accompanied by this growing visual spectacle. The combination of the rising light and the deep, resonant drone would have been overwhelming. The experience transforms the chamber from a tomb associated with death and ancestors into a symbol of rebirth and the returning sun. The entire structure can be seen as a metaphor for birth and renewal. The long, dark passage represents the birth canal, and the central chamber is the womb. The winter solstice sun represents the moment of emergence of new life. The acoustics complete this metaphor perfectly. The sound from outside, representing the world of the living, is filtered and softened, just as sounds are muffled for a child in the womb. This was a multi-sensory ritual engineered to produce a specific psychological state, a state of awe, connection to the cycles of nature, and a visceral understanding of death and rebirth. Newgrange stands as a testament to the fact that 5,000 years ago, people understood the power of sound to shape human emotion and spiritual belief. They used the very form of their architecture to manipulate auditory perception, creating a ceremonial experience that was as powerful to the ear as it was to the eye, proving that the science of sacred sound had truly global roots. Of course, the journey into the world of ancient acoustics is not without its own echoes of debate. For every researcher who hears the deliberate hand of a master acoustic engineer in these spaces, there is a skeptic who urges caution, reminding us that correlation is not the same as causation. This is not a fringe view. It represents a significant and respected perspective within mainstream archaeology. The central argument from this camp is one of Occam's razor. What is the simplest explanation? They propose that many of the remarkable acoustic effects we marvel at today could be unintended byproducts of achieving other, more practical goals. For instance, the near-perfect acoustics of the Greek theater might primarily be a happy consequence of designing a structure where thousands of people needed an unobstructed view of the stage. The steeply raked, semicircular seating was an excellent solution for visibility, and its acoustic properties came along for the ride. Similarly, the long reverberation in a Gothic cathedral is an inevitable physical result of building an enormous stone box with a high, vaulted ceiling, a design driven by theological ambition and structural innovation, not an acoustic blueprint. A major point of contention is the danger of what scholars call presentism, the act of projecting our modern, scientifically informed worldview onto ancient cultures. We live in an age where we understand sound waves as measurable physics. We have recording studios with sophisticated acoustic treatment and concert halls designed by teams of engineers. It is all too easy to look at an ancient site, discover it has interesting acoustic properties, and conclude that the builders must have had the same knowledge and intentions as a 21st century acoustic consultant. The skeptics rightly ask, where is the direct evidence? Can we find ancient texts from Egypt that describe the desired reverberation time for a pyramid's chamber? Are there tool marks on the stones of Chavín de Huántar that indicate a builder was fine-tuning a wall angle to correct a specific echo? Without such explicit evidence, the case for intentional acoustic design often rests on inference and interpretation, which can be subjective. This skepticism is not meant to dismiss the fascinating discoveries of archaeoacoustics. Rather, it serves as a crucial quality control mechanism. It forces researchers to be more rigorous in their methods and more creative in their search for proof. For example, if an acoustic effect was truly intentional, we might expect to see a pattern. If one Maya ball court produces a Quetzal bird echo, do all others from the same period and culture also produce it? If so, that strengthens the case for a shared, deliberate design principle. If not, it might be a unique feature of that specific site's geology or a fortunate accident of its particular dimensions. This debate pushes the field beyond simple observation and into the realm of testable, falsifiable hypotheses. Ultimately, this tension between the proponents of ancient sonic science and the advocates of cautious interpretation is not a weakness of the field, it is its greatest strength. It is the engine of scientific progress. The skeptics force the acoustic enthusiasts to dig deeper, to build better models, and to search for that elusive smoking gun. Perhaps an inscription, a previously misunderstood building instruction, or a pattern of wear on a stone that could only come from repeated sonic testing. This rigorous back and forth ensures that our understanding of the past is not built on romantic speculation, but on a solid foundation of evidence. It enriches the conversation, ensuring that the sound maps we are drawing of the ancient world are as accurate and nuanced as possible, reflecting not only what we want to hear, but what the stones themselves are truly telling us. But beyond the psychological manipulation of individuals and the creation of awe-inspiring spiritual experiences, these ancient soundscapes served a purpose that was deeply, fundamentally social. This brings us to our sixth principle, one that moves from the personal to the collective, the power of community and collective vibration. Imagine for a moment the challenge of building a civilization without mass media, without instant communication, without any way to easily disseminate a shared identity or a common set of beliefs to a large, dispersed population. How do you turn a collection of individuals, families, and clans into a unified people? The ancient world found a powerful answer in shared experience, and few experiences are as immediate and visceral as a shared auditory event. Sacred acoustics became a sophisticated tool for social engineering, using the physics of sound to synchronize the hearts and minds of thousands of people at once. Consider the practical reality of a large religious ceremony in a place like the Great Plaza of a Mesopotamian ziggurat or the courtyard of an Egyptian temple. A single leader, a priest or a king, needs to address a massive crowd. Without amplification, their voice would be lost to all but those standing closest. But by designing the space with acoustic principles in mind, perhaps by placing the speaker on a raised platform at the focal point of a curved wall, or by constructing the plaza with sound-reflecting stone surfaces, that one voice could be projected clearly across the entire gathering. This is more than just a practical solution to a public address problem. It is a profound act of community building. When thousands of people hear the same words at the same time with the same clarity, a powerful psychological shift occurs. The message is not filtered through whispers or distorted by distance. It is received collectively, creating a unified understanding and a shared focus. The individual dissolves into the crowd, and a temporary but potent sense of unity is forged. This effect is magnified exponentially when the sound is not just speech, but music or rhythmic chanting. The human brain has a natural tendency to synchronize with external rhythms, a phenomenon known as entrainment. When a group of people chant together in a highly resonant space, something remarkable happens. The long reverberation time blurs the individual voices, merging them into a single, powerful, collective sound. You can no longer distinguish your own voice from your neighbor's. You become part of a sonic entity much larger than yourself. This experience can induce a state of collective effervescence, a term coined by sociologist Emile Durkheim to describe the feeling of energy and harmony that arises when a group of people engage in the same action simultaneously. In this state, social bonds are strengthened, individual anxieties are diminished, and a powerful sense of belonging emerges. The architecture, through its acoustic properties, acts as a catalyst for this social alchemy, transforming a crowd of individuals into a cohesive community. We can see this principle at work across different scales and cultures. In the great kivas of the ancestral pueblones in the American Southwest, the circular, underground design ensured that every participant gathered around the central fire pit would be equally immersed in the sound of prayers and drums. This fostered a strong sense of egalitarian community. In contrast, the grand basilicas of the Roman Empire were designed with long, reverberant naves that amplified the voice of the emperor or his officials, using acoustic power to reinforce political authority and social hierarchy. In both cases, the shared sonic environment was instrumental in shaping the social order. The stability of these early civilizations depended on this kind of shared identity. By creating spaces where collective rituals could be experienced with maximum emotional impact, the ruling classes, whether priestly or political, could ensure the perpetuation of cultural norms, values, and myths. The temple or plaza was not just a place of worship or gathering. It was the factory where social cohesion was manufactured, using sound as its primary raw material. This principle reminds us that the echoes we hear in ancient ruins are not just ghosts of forgotten prayers. They are the echoes of society itself being built, one collective vibration at a time. Now let's transport ourselves to the humid air of the Yucatan Peninsula, to the Grand Ball Court of Chichen Itza. This is not a stadium in our modern sense, built for cheering fans and commercial spectacle. It is a vast stone-lined alley, flanked by towering parallel walls that stretch for over 130 meters, with stone rings set high upon them. The game played here, known simply as the ball game, was far more than a sport. It was a ritual reenactment of cosmic mythology, often involving themes of life, death, and the regeneration of the world. And as we are discovering, the very architecture of this space was engineered to be a participant in the drama, speaking in a voice that everyone present could understand. If you stand at the base of one of these immense walls and face your companion standing directly opposite at the other end of the court, something extraordinary happens. You can speak in the softest whisper, a secret meant only for their ears, and yet they will hear you with perfect clarity, as if you were standing right beside them. Over a distance longer than a modern football field, the court carries your voice. This phenomenon is a masterclass in acoustic physics. The secret lies in the precise, parallel alignment of the two massive walls. When you whisper, the sound waves do not travel in a straight line through the open air. Instead, they strike the nearest wall and are reflected, not just once, but repeatedly, creating a series of reflections that effectively leapfrog down the length of the court. These repeated reflections, known as a waveguide effect, prevent the sound from dispersing and losing its energy. The sound is channeled, almost like light through a fiber optic cable, directly to the listener at the far end. This was almost certainly an intentional design feature, a piece of architectural genius that allowed for communication across the vast ceremonial space, perhaps between priests or officials orchestrating the ritual. But the acoustic marvel does not end with a whisper. If you stand in the center of the court and clap your hands or shout, you are met with an even more mystical effect. Instead of a simple, decaying echo, you hear a sharp, distinct repetition that sounds uncannily like the chirp of a bird. Not just any bird, but the resplendent Quetzal, a creature of breathtaking beauty with iridescent green feathers, revered throughout Mesoamerica as a symbol of divinity, freedom, and the planet Venus. The connection is too precise to be coincidental. The builders of Chichen Itza, through painstaking calculation of the court's dimensions, the height and angle of the walls, and the placement of the stone rings, engineered the space to produce this specific auditory signature. We must consider the profound symbolic weight this would have carried during a ball game. The game itself was deeply tied to cosmology, often seen as a reenactment of the battle between the day and night skies, or the journey of the hero twins through the underworld as described in the Mayan text, the Popol Vuh. The outcome could have serious consequences, sometimes even involving the ritual sacrifice of players, an act believed to ensure the renewal of the sun and the continuation of life. In this intensely charged atmosphere, the sound of the game was critical. The heavy, solid rubber ball, weighing several kilograms, would have made a deep, percussive thud as it was struck by players' hips and forearms. The acoustics of the court would have amplified this sound, turning each impact into a resonant boom. And then, punctuating this rhythm, would be the shouts of the players and the crowd, which the court would transform into the sacred call of the Quetzal bird. For the participants and spectators, this was not an acoustic curiosity. It was a direct message from the spirit world. The Quetzal's chirp, emanating from the very stones of the court, would have been interpreted as the voice of the gods or the ancestors, approving of the ritual, participating in the cosmic drama unfolding before them. It linked the earthly competition directly to the celestial realm, blurring the line between a sporting event and a divine ceremony. The architecture ensured that every sound produced during the game, from the whisper of a conspirator to the thud of the ball, was infused with layers of spiritual meaning. The ball court was not a passive container for the game. It was an active instrument, its acoustic properties as integral to the ritual as the rules of the game themselves, proving that for these ancient cultures, sport, spirituality, and science were seamlessly and brilliantly intertwined. Of course, the shape of a space was crucial, but the very substance of the walls themselves held an equally potent secret. The ancient master builders were not just architects, they were acoustic alchemists possessing a deep, intuitive understanding of material science. They knew that the soul of a stone determined the voice of the temple. The choice of building material was never arbitrary. It was the final, critical step in tuning a sacred space, a deliberate selection process that transformed inert rock into a resonant instrument. This was a form of practical magic, where the geological history of a region became the palette for creating specific sonic atmospheres. Consider the fundamental difference between two common stones, limestone and granite. Limestone, a sedimentary rock formed from the compressed skeletons of ancient marine life, is relatively soft and porous. If you were to strike a block of limestone, the sound would be somewhat muted with a quick decay. In an architectural setting, this porosity acts as a natural sound absorber, particularly for higher frequencies. A chamber built primarily from limestone would have a warmer, softer acoustic character. The reverberation would be shorter and gentler, creating an intimate, almost cushioned auditory environment. This would be ideal for spaces designed for quiet meditation, reflective prayer, or scholarly discussion, where clarity of speech without overwhelming echo was paramount. It's a sound that feels close and contained. Now, imagine the sonic signature of granite. This is an igneous rock, born from the intense heat and pressure of the Earth's magma chambers. It is incredibly dense, hard, and non-porous. When sound waves hit a granite surface, they are not absorbed, they are reflected with immense power and efficiency. A temple built from granite, like the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, becomes a brilliantly resonant cavity. Sounds within it are brighter, sharper, and they ring out for a much longer time. The echoes are clear and distinct. This creates a dramatic, powerful, and potentially overwhelming sonic experience, perfect for ceremonies designed to inspire awe, to simulate the voice of a deity, or to facilitate ecstatic states where the goal was to be immersed in a continuous, vibrating energy field. The builders were effectively choosing the vocal cords for their architectural creations, selecting limestone for a gentle whisper and granite for a booming proclamation. This sophisticated material knowledge wasn't limited to these broad categories. We find exquisite examples of hyper-specific selection. On the island of Crete, the magnificent Bronze Age palaces of the Minoans, such as Knossos, reveal an astonishing level of acoustic refinement. In certain rooms, particularly those believed to be used for ceremonial gatherings or by the elite, the Minoans applied a polished, translucent sheathing to the walls made from a specific type of gypsum, known as alabaster. This was not merely a decorative choice to create a shimmering, luxurious effect. Gypsum has unique acoustic damping qualities. It absorbs a significant amount of sound energy, particularly in the mid-frequency range, which is where the human voice carries much of its intelligibility. By lining a room with this material, the minoans could effectively deaden the acoustics, reducing background noise and reverberation. This would have made these spaces excellent for clear conversation and intricate musical performances, allowing the subtle harmonics of lyres and flutes to be heard without being muddied by echoes. It was an early example of targeted acoustic treatment, a deliberate move to create a controlled, refined sonic environment for the palace's most important activities. This practice of acoustic alchemy reveals a holistic design process. The ancient architect would begin with a spiritual purpose, an oracle needed to be disorienting, a meditation chamber serene, a celebration hall vibrant. That purpose dictated the desired sonic atmosphere. The atmosphere, in turn, guided the choice of geometric shape and the precise mathematical proportions of the space. And finally, to complete the instrument, the builder would select the perfect stone from the local quarry, or in the case of the minoans, import a specialized material to give the space its precise auditory signature. Every decision was interconnected. The knowledge was passed down through generations of stonemasons and priests, a cumulative science developed through millennia of trial and error, of listening intently to how different materials sang when struck, shaped, and assembled. They understood that to build for the spirit, they had to first understand the voice of the earth itself, harnessing the resonant soul of stone to shape the human experience in the most profound and lasting ways. While computer models provide a stunning digital window into the past, they can only simulate a finished structure. They cannot capture the messy, iterative process of creation, the countless decisions made by the builders themselves as they listened to the emerging sound of their work. To bridge this gap, a different, more tactile branch of science has emerged: experimental archaeology. This is not a desk-bound discipline. It is a field of dirt, stone, and sweat, where researchers literally rebuild the past to understand its voice. By constructing scale models and even full-sized replicas using only the tools and techniques available to ancient cultures, these modern investigators engage in a profound physical dialogue with history, testing acoustic theories with their own hands and ears. Take, for example, the ambitious project to reconstruct a portion of a Maya ball court. A team might begin by quarrying limestone using stone hammers and fire-setting techniques, experiencing the immense labor required to produce a single block. As they carefully shape the stones and begin to erect the parallel walls, they can conduct acoustic tests at every stage. They might discover that the famous whispering effect only becomes clear once the walls reach a critical height, or that the Quetzal bird echo emerges only after the final layer of plaster is applied. This hands-on process reveals something no software can: the acoustic feedback loop that guided the ancient architects. A builder in the year 800, hearing an unexpected echo as a new course of stones was laid, might have subtly adjusted the angle of the next block to enhance or diminish that effect. Experimental archaeology allows us to witness this moment of discovery, to understand that these acoustic wonders were not always pre-planned blueprints, but often emerged through a process of on-site experimentation and refinement. This approach also sheds light on the crucial relationship between construction materials and the human voice. A computer model can tell you the reverberation time of a finished granite chamber. But an experimental archaeologist, chanting inside a full-scale replica built with authentic tools, can feel how the voice must be projected from the diaphragm to fill the space effectively. They can experiment with different vocal techniques, deep, resonant drones versus sharp, staccato calls, and learn which ones are naturally amplified by the architecture. This can lead to revolutionary insights, perhaps the distinct style of Gregorian chant, with its long, sustained notes, evolved not just for theological reasons, but because it was the most effective way to activate the resonant frequencies of the stone cathedrals being built at the time. By physically embodying the role of an ancient priest or musician, the researcher gains an intuitive, visceral understanding that data alone cannot provide. Perhaps the greatest value of this method is its ability to test the limits of possibility. Skeptics often question whether certain acoustic effects were intentional or merely fortunate accidents. Experimental archaeology provides a powerful way to address this. If a research team sets out to build a structure with a specific sonic goal, such as creating a focused reflection point for a speaker, and they succeed using only period-appropriate methods, it strongly suggests that the original builders could have done the same. Conversely, if achieving a particular effect proves impossibly difficult without modern knowledge or tools, it casts doubt on theories of advanced intentionality. This process turns abstract debate into a practical, testable experiment. It is a form of scientific rigor that grounds the often esoteric field of archaeoacoustics in the tangible reality of physical labor and practical skill. Ultimately, this is more than just data collection. It is a form of respectful conversation with our ancestors. By struggling with the same heavy stones, by feeling the same blisters on their hands, and by listening intently to the sounds that emerge from their collective effort, experimental archaeologists achieve a unique empathy for the ancient mind. They learn not just what the builders were capable of, but how they might have thought and solved problems. Each reconstructed wall, each carefully measured echo, is a question posed to the past. And the answer comes not in words, but in the resonance that fills the air, a shared moment of understanding across the centuries that honors the ingenuity of those who first learned to build with sound. This recurring pattern across the globe is one of the most compelling mysteries in our entire exploration. It raises a profound question. How is it that cultures separated by vast oceans and thousands of years with no possibility of contact all arrived at the same fundamental conclusion, that the built environment could be an instrument for the spirit? From the Buddhist stupas of Asia, designed to resonate with the chanted Om, to the Mayan pyramids where the steps mimic the sound of the sacred Quetzal bird, we are witnessing what appears to be a universal human intuition. This isn't about the transfer of a specific technology. It's about a shared impulse that seems to be woven into the very fabric of human consciousness. It suggests that long before the scientific revolution gave us the vocabulary of frequencies and wavelengths, humanity possessed a deep, experiential understanding of sound's unique power to bridge the gap between the mundane and the miraculous. Consider the fundamental human experiences that transcend culture: the calming effect of a mother's lullaby, the unifying power of a community song, the adrenaline rush of a thunderous drumbeat. These are universal. Sound is our first and most intimate sense. We hear our mother's heartbeat from within the womb. It is visceral, affecting us on a primal level that sight simply cannot match. A terrifying sound can freeze us in our tracks. A beautiful melody can move us to tears. Ancient cultures, living in a world far quieter than our own, were exquisitely attuned to these nuances. They observed that rhythmic drumming could lead to trance states, that sustained chanting could produce feelings of blissful unity, and that certain echoes felt like a response from an unseen world. They didn't need to understand the physics of sympathetic vibration to feel its effect in their bones. This shared sensory reality became the common foundation upon which different civilizations built their unique acoustic traditions. The variations in technique and belief are just as telling as the similarities. In the Himalayas, the design of a monastery might focus on creating a low, continuous drone to support meditative states, reflecting a spiritual goal of inner stillness and dissolution of the self. Meanwhile, in the American Southwest, a Pueblo kiva might use its circular form and earthen materials to create a warm, intimate acoustic for storytelling and community bonding, emphasizing social cohesion. The ancient Egyptians, with their focus on the afterlife, engineered their stone chambers for overwhelming, disorienting reverberation to simulate the journey of the soul. The common thread is not a specific sound, but the intentional use of architecture to orchestrate a specific psychological and spiritual outcome. They all recognized that the space around them was not neutral. It was an active participant in the human quest for meaning. This points to a fascinating possibility that the knowledge of sacred acoustics may be a form of convergent cultural evolution. Just as biology shows us that wings evolved independently in birds, bats, and insects to solve the problem of flight, different human societies independently discovered how to shape stone to solve the problem of transcendence. They were all responding to the same fundamental human yearning, to touch the divine, to make contact with the ancestors, to understand our place in the cosmos. And they all found that sound, amplified and shaped by architecture, was one of the most powerful tools to do it. This wasn't a secret doctrine passed from a master to an apprentice. It was a truth that emerged again and again from the simple act of listening deeply to the world and to the human heart. The global legacy of sacred sound is perhaps our strongest evidence that the desire to connect with something greater than ourselves is not a cultural artifact, but a defining characteristic of what it means to be human. Moving beyond the confines of sacred spaces, this ancient understanding of sound extended its reach into the very fabric of daily life and survival, shaping the wider landscape in a practical yet equally brilliant way. Our eighth principle explores the idea of navigation and auditory landmarks, a concept where the natural and built environment became a vast, invisible map, guiding travelers long before the first cartographer put pen to parchment. In a world without street signs, GPS, or even reliable written directions, ancient peoples developed a sophisticated acoustic literacy, learning to read the sonic signatures of their terrain to find their way and communicate across vast distances. This was a practical application of the same physics that made temples resonate, but here the goal was not transcendence, it was simple, essential orientation. Imagine yourself as a trader or a messenger in the Bronze Age, journeying through a dense, unfamiliar forest or across a featureless, fog-shrouded moor. Visibility might be reduced to just a few feet, and a wrong turn could mean disaster. In such an environment, the ears become as important as the eyes. A cleverly placed monolith positioned at a key fork in a valley might not just be a territorial marker. If you clapped your hands or shouted as you approached it, the specific echo it produced, perhaps a sharp, single bounce back, could tell you that you were on the correct path. A different rock formation with a more complex, fluttering echo might signal a dangerous cliff edge or a ravine hidden by the mist. These were not just rocks, they were acoustic signposts, carefully positioned to interact with sound waves in a predictable, informative way. The landscape itself was engineered to speak to those who knew how to listen. This principle finds a powerful echo in the traditions of indigenous cultures around the world. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia, for instance, have used songlines for tens of thousands of years. These are not just paths across the land, they are intricate sequences of songs that describe the features of the landscape, the rocks, the waterholes, the mountains. Each feature in the song has a corresponding musical phrase. By singing the song while walking, the traveler literally sings their way across the country, using the rhythm and melody as a mnemonic map. But it goes deeper than memory. Certain natural features along these routes are known to produce specific echoes or resonances when sung to. The correct note sung at the correct rock face would produce a confirming echo, a kind of auditory handshake between the traveler and the land, verifying their location and direction. This is acoustic navigation in its most profound form, where the land and the human voice are in a constant, confirming dialogue. We can see the remnants of this idea in later, more familiar structures. The church bell tower that dominated a medieval town is a clear descendant of this ancient principle. The bell's peal could be heard for miles, serving as a sonic lighthouse for travelers, guiding them home from the surrounding countryside. But the concept is almost certainly much older. In places like the windswept moors of Britain, there are mysterious rock gongs, or ringing rocks, large boulders that produce a clear, bell-like tone when struck with a smaller stone. Their strategic placement on high ground suggests they may have been used as primitive but effective communication devices. A series of such rocks, positioned within earshot of one another, could have formed a kind of prehistoric telegraph system, relaying simple messages across long distances by a sequence of coded strikes. The strategic shaping of hillsides, creating natural parabolic curves, could act as massive sound mirrors, focusing whispers across valleys that would otherwise be too wide for the human voice to cross. This practice of acoustic geomancy for navigation forces us to reimagine ancient landscapes not as silent, passive backdrops, but as active, communicative partners in human endeavor. A forest was not just a collection of trees, it was a complex sonic environment full of information. A mountain pass was not just a gap between peaks, it was a channel for sound that could carry warnings or greetings. The ability to use these properties required an intimate, generational knowledge of the land, a knowledge that was essential for trade, migration, and cultural connection. It represents a forgotten layer of infrastructure, one made not of roads and bridges, but of carefully understood sound waves, turning the entire world into a resonant guide for those who learn to hear its subtle yet constant conversation. So where do we go from here? The field of archaeoacoustics is standing at a thrilling threshold, poised to move from simply rediscovering these ancient soundscapes to truly understanding their full impact on the human experience. The future is not about a single discipline working in isolation. It is about breaking down the walls between fields. Imagine a research team where a field archaeologist who has spent decades excavating a site works side by side with a concert violinist who understands the nuances of harmonic resonance, an acoustic physicist who can model sound wave diffraction with complex algorithms, and a neuroscientist who can measure the brain's response to different auditory environments. This kind of deep, interdisciplinary collaboration is the new frontier. The archaeologist provides the context, the musician provides the authentic sound sources, the acoustician provides the measurement, and the neuroscientist reveals the biological effect. Together, they can answer questions that were previously unaskable. One of the most exciting upcoming areas of research involves connecting the dots between the physics of a space and the physiology of the people within it. We can now map the acoustic signature of the oracle room at Delphi with incredible precision, but the next step is to understand what that specific combination of infrasound and audible reverberation actually does to the human brain. Using technologies like electroencephalography, or EEG, which measures brainwave patterns, and functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, which shows blood flow in the brain, researchers can place subjects in a lab and expose them to recordings or simulations of these ancient soundscapes. The goal is to move beyond speculation and gather hard data. Does the long reverberation time of a cathedral consistently induce alpha waves associated with relaxed alertness? Does the disorienting echo of a Maya ball court trigger a stress response in the amygdala? By linking specific acoustic properties to measurable neurological states, we can build a scientific foundation for understanding how these spaces were used to guide consciousness, proving that the feelings of awe or unease we describe were not just poetic metaphors, but tangible, predictable biological reactions engineered by the architects. This leads to a future where virtual reality, or VR, will become the ultimate time machine. The current tools of acoustic modeling create a digital twin that we can analyze on a screen, but the next generation of technology will allow us to step inside it. Imagine not just seeing a 3D model of Newgrange on your computer, but putting on a VR headset and haptic suit that transports you there. You would see the intricate spiral carvings on the stones in the dim light, feel a slight vibration in the suit as a virtual drum is beaten outside the entrance, and most importantly, you would hear the sound with full spatial audio. Your own voice would be processed in real time through the acoustic model of the tomb, so when you whisper, you would hear it muffled and transformed, just as an initiate would have thousands of years ago. This is not science fiction. The foundational technology for this exists today. The challenge is integrating the ultra-high-fidelity acoustic models with immersive visual and haptic feedback to create a seamless and profoundly powerful experiential simulation. The implications of this are monumental for public engagement and education. For decades, the public's interaction with ancient history has been largely visual, looking at artifacts behind glass in a museum or at photographs in a book. This creates a certain distance, but to virtually stand in the center of Stonehenge at dawn and hear the way the stones shape the sound of your own breathing, or to sit in the seats of the theater of Epidaurus and understand the acoustic clarity firsthand, is to forge an emotional connection that a textbook simply cannot provide. It democratizes access in an unprecedented way. A school child in a classroom in Tokyo, an elderly person with limited mobility in Brazil, or a curious enthusiast in a small town anywhere in the world could, with relatively affordable technology, gain direct experiential access to these World Heritage sites. This has the power to ignite a global passion for cultural preservation and to foster a deeper, more intuitive understanding of our shared human past. We are on the cusp of not just studying history, but of allowing future generations to feel it, hear it, and truly stand within its resonant echo. This incredible sonic heritage, this library of ancient echoes we have been exploring, is facing a silent crisis. The very stones that have resonated for millennia are now under threat from a chorus of modern dangers, and the subtle acoustic properties that define these spaces are uniquely vulnerable. Unlike a faded painting or a cracked sculpture, a lost soundscape leaves no visible scar. The damage is invisible, happening at a frequency level, and by the time we notice, the magic may already be gone. The challenge of preservation is no longer just about keeping the walls from crumbling. It's about safeguarding the very air within them, the intangible quality that makes a sacred space feel alive. One of the most insidious threats comes from the materials used in well-intentioned restoration projects. For centuries, the goal of conservation was primarily visual, to stabilize a structure and make it look as it did in the past. This often meant using modern cements, concrete, and synthetic mortars to repoint stones or repair walls. While these materials are strong and durable, they have very different acoustic properties from the original lime mortars and earthen plasters. A layer of hard, non-porous cement plastered over a resonant limestone wall can act like an acoustic seal, deadening the reflections and dramatically shortening the reverberation time. It's the equivalent of putting thick carpet over a finely tuned wooden sounding board. The space may look more pristine, but it has lost its voice, its sonic soul replaced by a modern material that prioritizes visual permanence over auditory authenticity. Then there is the constant, absorbing presence of people. Mass tourism, while vital for funding conservation, presents a direct acoustic challenge. Sound waves are energy, and that energy is absorbed by soft surfaces, and a crowd of people in winter coats and backpacks is one of the most effective sound-absorbing materials imaginable. On a typical day at a place like the Hypogeum in Malta, where visitor numbers are strictly limited to protect the delicate microclimate, the acoustic experience can still be profound. But imagine a famous cathedral during peak season, with hundreds of visitors packed into the nave. The glorious 10-second reverberation that defines the space when empty can be reduced to a mere 2 or 3 seconds. The sonic character of the building is completely transformed by the audience, making it impossible to experience the acoustic environment as it was designed for a smaller congregation or a solitary priest. Managing this delicate balance between access and preservation requires incredibly nuanced strategies, like creating designated silent hours for acoustic appreciation or using timed ticketing to prevent overcrowding. Beyond the walls of the monuments themselves, the broader environment is changing in ways that threaten these ancient sound maps. Air pollution doesn't just darken stone facades. Particulate matter in the air can actually affect the propagation of sound waves, subtly dampening high frequencies. More profoundly, climate change is altering the very atmosphere. Increases in temperature and humidity can change the speed of sound and how it travels through a space. While these effects might be subtle to the casual visitor, for researchers trying to create a precise acoustic baseline of a site, these shifting environmental conditions add a layer of complexity. Furthermore, extreme weather events, more frequent and intense storms, flooding, and heat waves pose a direct physical threat to the structural integrity of these ancient places, which in turn directly impacts their sonic properties. A cracked stone or a shifted wall angle can irrevocably alter a carefully engineered echo. The response to this crisis is forging a new frontier in heritage conservation. Organizations like UNESCO are beginning to move beyond protecting a site's visual and structural integrity to safeguarding its intangible cultural heritage, which can include its associated soundscapes. This requires a radical new approach. The first step is comprehensive acoustic documentation. Before any restoration begins, teams are now using impulse response recording and 3D laser scanning to create a detailed sonic fingerprint of the space. This baseline recording becomes a priceless archive, a reference point against which any future changes can be measured. It ensures that if a stone must be replaced or a wall repaired, conservators can test new materials and construction techniques against the original acoustic model, choosing options that preserve not just the look but the sound of the space. This new philosophy represents a profound shift in how we value our past. It acknowledges that these places were not meant to be experienced as silent museums. Their power was multisensory, and the auditory dimension was often the key to their spiritual and social function. To preserve only the stone shell while allowing the sonic soul to fade is to preserve a ghost. The work being done today by acoustic archaeologists and forward-thinking conservators is a race against time. They are not just saving ruins, they are saving experiences. They are fighting to ensure that future generations can still stand in the center of an ancient temple, lean close to a companion, and hear a whisper travel across the centuries, clear and unmistakable, a direct line to a past that still has so much to say. But after exploring the overwhelming power of resonant echoes and earth-shaking vibrations, we must now turn our attention to their perfect opposite, to the profound power of nothing at all. In the intricate acoustic maps of the ancients, sound and silence were not enemies. They were partners in a delicate dance. The ninth and perhaps most subtle principle we encounter is the intentional creation of silence itself. We have marveled at spaces designed to make the softest whisper travel for hundreds of feet, but now consider the opposite achievement, a chamber built to swallow all sound, to create a void of such absolute quiet that the only thing left to hear is the rhythm of your own heartbeat. This was not an absence of design, it was the pinnacle of acoustic artistry, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding that true power often lies in contrast. To appreciate the brilliance of this, think of a master musician. They know that the space between the notes is as crucial as the notes themselves. A dramatic pause before a crescendo makes the ensuing blast of sound feel even more powerful. The ancient architects were masters of this same concept, but on an architectural scale. They understood that an hour of constant, droning chanting could lose its impact, becoming mere background noise. But if that same chanting was preceded by a period of utter, profound silence, the first note would strike with the force of a thunderclap. This use of acoustic contrast was a deliberate psychological tool. By leading an initiate through a series of spaces, first a long, silent passage that deadened all sound, and then suddenly into a grand, resonant chamber filled with chanting, the architects could orchestrate a shock to the system, a visceral jolt that made the spiritual experience feel more immediate and transcendent. The silence was the anvil upon which the sound was forged. We find stunning examples of this in the deep, subterranean chambers of various ancient complexes. While many underground spaces naturally have a muted quality, some show clear evidence of intentional sound deadening design. In certain Egyptian tombs, for instance, burial chambers located far from the entrance passage were sometimes lined with layers of soft, fibrous materials like reed matting or coarse textiles behind stone veneers. These materials act as natural acoustic absorbers, soaking up sound waves and preventing them from reflecting back into the room. The goal was to create a space of eternal quiet for the deceased, but for the living priests conducting the final rites, the effect would have been one of intense, focused intimacy, where every word spoken felt heavy and final, unheard by the world above. This pursuit of silence was perhaps most critical for practices of deep meditation and oracular trance. Imagine the oracle at Delphi preparing to deliver a prophecy. Before she descended into the potentially chaotic chamber with its seismic vibrations, she likely spent time in a preparatory room, a space designed for quiet contemplation. If this antechamber was acoustically treated to block out the distant murmurs of the crowd and the sounds of the temple, it would have allowed her to achieve the necessary inner stillness. In this context, silence was not empty, it was a fertile ground for revelation. For a mystic or a shaman, external noise is a distraction from the subtle voices of intuition or the divine. By architecturally creating a bubble of silence, the ancient builders provided the ideal conditions for journeying inward, for listening to the whispers of the spirit that are so easily drowned out by the noise of everyday life. The technological challenge of creating such silence in an age before synthetic soundproofing was immense. It required a deep knowledge of materials and construction techniques. Builders might use double-walled construction with a layer of sand or rubble packed between the walls to dampen vibration. They might incorporate porous stones or even build chambers with intentionally irregular, non-parallel surfaces to prevent sound waves from building up into a coherent echo. The entrance to such a silent chamber would often be a long, twisting corridor, which acts as a natural sound baffle, stripping incoming sound of its energy. This meticulous engineering proves that the management of silence was as deliberate and calculated as the tuning of a resonant frequency. It was an active creation, not a passive absence. This principle invites us to reconsider the soundscapes of the ancient world, not as a monologue, but as a carefully composed symphony with dynamic range. It had its loud, powerful fortissimos in the great plazas and resonant temples, and its delicate, breathless pianissimos in the secluded meditation cells and silent tombs. The architects were the conductors, using the entire palette of acoustic possibility to guide the emotional and spiritual journey of the individual. In our modern world, saturated with relentless noise, the ancient value placed on sacred silence feels more relevant than ever. It reminds us that quietude is not a void to be filled, but a sacred space to be cultivated, a necessary counterpoint to the music of existence, and a profound technology in its own right. So what does this journey through the resonant past mean for us, living in a world that is often deafening? The ancient wisdom of sacred acoustics offers a powerful and urgently needed corrective to our modern reality. We have become masters of creating noise, but we have forgotten the art of cultivating sound. Our cities are cacophonies of traffic, construction, and digital notifications, while our homes and offices are often designed with acoustics as a mere afterthought, resulting in spaces that are either jarringly echoey or deadeningly sterile. The science is clear. Chronic exposure to chaotic noise pollution contributes to stress, anxiety, and a decline in cognitive function. Conversely, studies show that well-designed acoustic environments can lower blood pressure, improve concentration, and foster a greater sense of well-being. The ancients understood this intuitively. They knew that the soundscape was a nutrient for the soul. Their legacy is a challenge to our contemporary architects and city planners to stop treating acoustics as a technical problem to be solved with soundproofing panels after a building is complete, and to start viewing it as a foundational element of design, as vital as the floor plan or the structural integrity. Imagine the transformation if we applied these principles today. A hospital could be designed not just with sterile, quiet corridors, but with specific wards tuned to promote healing, perhaps with gentle, low-frequency resonances to calm anxiety in a psychiatric unit, or with sound-diffusing surfaces in a recovery room to ensure restorative sleep. A school classroom could be shaped to naturally amplify a teacher's voice without shouting, while also incorporating quiet nooks with absorbent materials for focused, individual study. Public libraries could become havens of intentional silence, designed with the same acoustic care as a medieval monastery's scriptorium. And our city squares and parks could be landscaped to create natural amphitheaters for community gatherings, or peaceful zones shielded from urban din by strategic earthworks and vegetation. This isn't a fanciful dream. It is a call for a new architectural ethic, one that recognizes that the quality of the space between our ears is directly influenced by the quality of the space around us. We have the technology and the understanding to build environments that don't just house us, but that actively nurture us, using the ancient art of acoustic design to promote peace, focus, and genuine human connection. On a more personal level, this exploration invites a quiet revolution in our own daily lives. It encourages us to become more mindful listeners, to move through the world with our ears wide open. We can start by consciously seeking out what we might call resonant sanctuaries. These don't have to be ancient temples, they can be found in the everyday. It might be the quiet hush of a local library, the specific acoustic of a favorite, high-ceilinged coffee shop where the murmur of conversation becomes a comforting drone, or the way sound behaves in a tiled subway station, creating its own unique, momentary music. Most powerfully, we can seek these sanctuaries in nature. Take a walk into a dense forest after a rainfall and listen to how the wet leaves and pine needles absorb sound, creating a sphere of profound quiet. Stand at the edge of a canyon and experience the thrill of your own voice returning to you, transformed by its journey across space. or simply lie on the grass in a wide open field and listen to the wind, an ancient sound that has shaped human consciousness since the beginning of time. This practice of deep listening is a form of meditation. It pulls us out of the frantic internal monologue of our thoughts and anchors us in the physical reality of the present moment. By paying attention to the hidden music of the world, the rhythm of our own footsteps, the pitch of a boiling kettle, the complex harmonics of a distant siren, we reclaim a sensory awareness that our noisy world often suppresses. We begin to understand that sound is not just background noise. It is a constant, rich dialogue between ourselves and our environment. The ancient builders saw the world as a resonant, living entity with which they could collaborate. We can reclaim that relationship. It starts with a simple decision to pause, to be silent, and to truly listen. In doing so, we might just rediscover a sense of awe, a connection to something larger than ourselves, and a quieter, more harmonious way of being in this beautifully